Good evening. I'd like to call to order tonight's regular meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees, Village of Burr Ridge, on October 12th. Tonight, of course, we're going to be starting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll be led tonight by a student from Pleasantdale Elementary School named Juliana Martinez. Now, according to her principal, she's an excellent fourth grader, and she loves school and has friends at every grade level. She's a dedicated student and a positive role model for the rest of the students. She always tries her hardest, is one of the most enthusiastic students in the building. Her favorite subjects in school are science and reading. Her spare time, she does quite a bit of that, reading, but also drawing, playing outside, spending time with her large family. Her parents are Christine and Richard. Her dad is with her tonight, as well as her grandmother, and I believe a cousin, grandmother Madeline and Ariana. And I'd like to ask her to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Karen Thomas, may I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Francis.
Here.
Trustee Grasso.
Here.
Trustee Pavesa. Trustee Bolus.
Here.
Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Schiappa.
Here.
Mayor Straub.
Here. And now for the residents' comments section. Are there any residents in the boardroom tonight that would like to address the audience? Answer the board.
My name is Tom White. My family resides at 124 Syrup Lane in Carriageway Subdivision since 1998. I live there with my wife and son, who's employed part-time at Burr Ridge Lifetime Fitness. Over the years, my family and I, including my daughter's family, have come to love the village of Burr Ridge. It's a vibrant community where its citizens feel secure and enjoy life in a park-like setting. The village maintains and encourages state-of-the-art facilities such as our police station, the village center, new bridge overpass, our Veterans Memorial, to name a few. The village ensures through the Plan Commission, zoning ordinances, policies, and procedures that the Burr Ridge brand is maintained. I didn't hear it, pardon me, is maintained. Burr Ridge certainly is a very special place. I'm here tonight because I believe that much of this is being jeopardized by the village administrator's ongoing post-employment benefit underfunding policy, which continues to cause pension deficits to grow out of control. At your last meeting, the annual financial report was received and filed. I didn't hear any alarms set off. There should have been. All I saw was smiles. I'm referring to the informational portion regarding reporting under GASB 67, which is foreboding of next year's balance sheet juggernaut. A brief review of the notes to the financial statements of the village recently filed financial report cites the following: a growing post-employment benefit deficit, which is approaching $10 million. Implications that the $10 million is approximately really $14 million. For the last fiscal year, an employer post-retirement benefit contribution deficit of over $300,000, a cumulative historic employee post-retirement benefit deficit in excess of $2 million. Next year, the unfunded post-employment liability would be an entry on our GASB, on our village's balance sheet. That may be reason for concern, but it's not the real problem. The clock is ticking with regard to the state's RAM plan, police pension funding, as well as the village's non-funding of its post-employment health care benefits. All of these are designed to grow the deficit until eventually, within 10 years, the required contributions become budget busting, similar to the situation that the state of Illinois currently finds itself. Last May's Supreme Court decision upholding the non-diminishment clause of the Illinois Constitution, which guarantees the public pension benefits for all Illinois public employees, the justices determined the intent of the clause by reviewing the framers' concerns. Unless they were constrained, municipalities who prefer to use retirement money for other purposes, such as street repair, might abandon their pension obligations, leaving police officers, firefighters, and other civil servants unprotected. With this decision, things have changed. The courts and legislation can provide no further relief. Retirement benefits for new officers, those hired since 2010, have already been severely reduced. So far, this village has chosen to to annually add to the deficit, which is fiscally irresponsible. When the budget-busting statutory required contributions come due, there will be nowhere to turn. Beginning in 2016, Village Pension Fund has this police pension funding below the statutory required amount may be recovered by the pension fund as a credit against the village's state funding, regardless of how much the required contributions have escalated. That being the case, I implore you to consider the following. Pass a motion which directs the village administrator to provide an additional alternative tax levy for your consideration that minimally provides a police pension contribution at the GASB level, as stated in the actuarial valuation of April 30th. Review the following, possibly with the service of an independent human resource consultant having a goal of reducing expense benefits. One would be the ability to opt out of Social Security for future new police hires, currently replacing 6.2 contribution with maybe something like a 3% match into a tax-sheltered annuity type investment. The cost of post-retirement employee benefits, which I believe are not statutory protected, and the cost of current staff fringe benefits for health care and dental. If you had a charge card with no charge limit, would you continue to use it and never pay any more than the minimum, even in times when you had a cash surplus? This is what the village administrator, mayor, and previous mayor have decreed. Based upon past discussions, it is apparent that they are minimally intent on ignoring the situation. Things will only change if trustees Paveza, Murphy, and Schiappa have the courage to say enough. What will be your legacy? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any other residents who would like to address the board this time? Okay, seeing no one, I'd like to move on to the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the village board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda. Under minutes, number 5A, approval of regular board meeting of September 28th, 2015. 5B, receive and file draft economic development plan subcommittee meeting of September 30th, 2015. And 5C, receive and file draft plan commission meeting of October 5th, 2015. Under ordinances, we have 6A, approval of an ordinance granting a variation from the Village of Burr Ridge zoning ordinance to permit a patio with patio seat walls, a fireplace, and built-in grill in a required side and front yard. That's B02-2015, located 39 Fawn Court, last name Beck. Under 6B, approval of ordinance granting a variation from the Village of Burr Ridge zoning ordinance to permit a fence in an interior side yard that's B01-2015, located 512 Kirkwood Cove, last name Bennett. Resolutions. Under resolutions, we have 7B, adoption of resolution approving of subdivision fence and subdivision fence variations for the Carriageway Club subdivision. We have under considerations, we are at 8G, approval of Plan Commission recommendations to approve special use as per section XF.2-.0 of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance, permit retail sales of power tools, hand tools, and related items accessory to a warehouse and management office. Number Z15-2015, located 8080 Madison Street, Black & Decker. We have approval of under 8H, approval recommendation to fill part-time Public Works General Utility Worker 1 position in the Water Department. And 8I, approval of a vendor list in the amount of $521,489.48 for all funds, plus $237,563.57 for payroll, for a grand total of $759,053.05, which includes a special expenditure of $21,360 to L3 Communication Mobile for flashback HD DV system and rear seat cameras for the police department. Now I have a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda. That would be 6A, 6B, 5A, 5B, and 5C. See? Down. Also, under ordinances, 6A and 6B. And under resolutions, 7B, considerations. And we have 8G, 8H, HI. May I have a motion to approve those, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Grasso.
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa.
Yes.
Trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Bolus.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
5-0.
Motion passes 5-0. We are on to resolutions. This is also one of my favorite parts because it has to do with a very key person in the village. It is under resolutions, it's 7A, consideration of adoption of resolution recognizing 20 years of service to the village of Burr Ridge for Community Development Director Douglas J. Douglas Pollock. May I have a motion to approve that?
So moved. Second.
And before we go to roll call, Trustee Francis.
Discussion on the motion?
Discussion on the motion?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I've had the privilege of knowing Doug for 18 and a half years. When I first joined the Plan Commission in 1997, he, of course, was Community Development Director then and is now. Doug is well known for his attention to detail, his thoroughness, and his to completely prepare the Plan Commissioners to do their important task to serve the village. It's been my pleasure to work with Doug and know Doug these last 18 and a half years, and I want to congratulate him on his 20 years of service to this village. It's because of him that he's one of the reasons why this village is a very special place. Thank you, Doug.
And before I come out, before we actually go do the vote and do the pictures, I'd also like to say that I may have known Chief John Madden the longest, or one of the longest in the village, but I got to know you the best because as a resident, as a local business owner, my wife and I had purchased some property on North Frontage Road and then a building, and it had just all kinds of hoops to jump through because it was an old diner and garage converted to an office building. We bought property from the village. It was a long, complicated process, and from a resident standpoint, I just really came to love Doug Pollock and all that he did for us during that time, and of course as mayor, I've gotten to see what a tremendous impact he's made on this village from the inside. So, from the bottom of my heart, congratulations, Doug, and thank you very much for your service.
And Nikki, we should all go around and accolade Doug
Absolutely.
because he is amazing. But I could say, working with you on the Plan Commission and knowing you as a person, I've never met someone with more character and integrity than you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I've worked with Doug when I first moved back into the village, and it was just a real pleasure dealing with Doug and the fact that he knows so much about the village, and not only does he know, but he cares so much about our village, and that's what I think makes Doug so special to our village. So thank you, Doug.
Okay, shall we have a vote? Roll call?
Trustee Bolus.
Yes.
Trustee Grasso.
Yes.
Trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa.
Yes.
5-0.
All right, Doug. Again.
Great. Right.
if I may, I should say, really the thanks go to the trustees, current trustees, past trustees, the plan commissioners I've worked with, and most importantly, all the residents that I've had the opportunity to get to know and work with very closely over the years. And it kind of sounds like I'm going somewhere, but I'm not. So, thank you very much.
Okay. Under considerations, we have considerations of Plan Commission recommendation to approve rezoning of a 5-acre parcel from the R1 district to the R2B, single-family residence district of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance, zoning number Z-16, 2015, 7950 Bucktail Drive, McNaughton Brothers. Okay. We haven't talked to you in a while.
This is a request for rezoning of a 5-acre property on Buck Trail Drive. Buck Trail is a dead-end street right now. The developer is seeking the rezoning in order to accommodate the subdivision of the property. The subdivision is on your agenda separately as a separate item. This particular item is just limited to rezoning it from the R1 district to the R2B district. The property is surrounded by R2B district on 3 sides and the R3 district on 2 other sides. And the Plan Commission, based on that surrounding zoning and the surrounding development, and also based on the comprehensive plan recommendation for 30,000 square foot lots, which the R2B accommodates, the Plan Commission is recommending approval of rezoning of the property. The developer is also present. And as I said, the preliminary plat is separately on your agenda.
Board members have any questions of Doug? Grasso? Okay. Are there any residents that would like to address this topic? And your developer, is he here today?
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to come tonight and put this in front of you. My name is Bill McNaughton. I reside 16 West 347 83rd Street in Burr Ridge. I am acting as the developer. There are 5 individuals purchasing this property together, and we are in the process of obviously re-subdividing it to 5 lots, like you see here. Their intent, 2 of the owners or future owners of the property already live in Burr Ridge and request to obviously build new homes here. The other 3 are from the outside surrounding towns and would like to build their future home in Burr Ridge. All the owners are young families, most of them having younger children, but wanting to start their family and time here in Burr Ridge and grow as most of them did when they grew up.
Your family's been building in Burr Ridge for a long time, haven't they?
We have, yes.
And you have brothers in the business as well, as I recall, up in Hinsdale and, of course, down Orland Park and then now here?
Correct. My father actually has 2 brothers, both in the building business. The second generation of each of them, my uncles and their kids, are now working in the business, as well as my brother and I are in the business, and our office is in Burr Ridge, has been for the last 35 years. And then we've done a lot of completed nice projects in Burr Ridge. Pine Tree was probably one of our earliest projects, going all the way through Bridle Path, some other commercial buildings and redevelopments throughout the years.
And trustees, any questions of the builder?
I understand this portion is just to rezone, and thank you for rezoning to R2B. We do appreciate the larger lots, and we'd like to keep Burr Ridge having as large lots as possible. Maybe we can talk about stormwater at the subdivision.
No problem.
Any questions of Bill? Okay, may I have a motion to approve 8A?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Bolis?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Grasso? Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
5-0.
That motion passes 5-0. And now we're moving right on to, of course, a related topic, consideration of 8B, consideration of Plan Commission recommendation to approve preliminary plat of subdivision located at the same address, 7950 Bucktail Drive, McNaughton Builders.
Contingent on the zoning, the Plan Commission reviewed a request for preliminary plat of this same property. The plat proposes to divide the property into 5 lots plus an outlot for stormwater detention. At the Plan Commission meeting, there were several residents from the area who spoke at the public hearing or on this matter. Their primary concern was with stormwater management. The developer indicated that they would comply with all the stormwater regulations of the village and that they would go a step further by sending the outfall of the outlet for the stormwater pond 200 feet south of the property via an extra storm sewer pipe. Staff also has promised to meet with the residents prior to the approval of the final engineering to just go over it in greater detail than is available right now with the preliminary engineering. There was one subdivision variation being requested, and that was for the location of the storm, not the location, but the configuration of the stormwater outlot. Subdivision ordinance requires that outlots have the same frontage and lot width as a regular private lot, but given the topography of this property, in order to achieve that, they would have to lose a lot and have to dedicate land area that is not really doesn't function well as a part of the stormwater pond. Given that the request is for R2B district in compliance with the zoning ordinance, the Plan Commission felt that the variation was justified. And the Plan Commission, in summary, is recommending approval of the preliminary plat as well as the subdivision variation. The developer is present, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Doug?
The stormwater, we're saying that they are complying with managing the stormwater on this 5-acre parcel. Will it help the surrounding area?
I believe it will. Maybe Mr. Pricey can address that better than I can.
Ahead to the grading sheet or something? But they will be complying with the Cook County stormwater ordinance, the new one.
Right.
Is this the one you want? Strict and stringent. Yeah, that's fine. Watershed management ordinance and all the permit requirements there. Their outfall that they first proposed in there, we've asked for them to move. We know that it was a very sensitive outfall. Their overflow too was in an unacceptable sensitive area, and we've asked them to move that. And it sounds like, by all considerations, the engineer is going to comply with those things.
So any additional flooding or ponding or anything in neighbors' yards or backyards, nothing should occur from this development? Matter of fact, would it take more water out?
It would seem to intercept more water that would normally be flowing to that area. The sensitive Burr Oaks Glen South subdivision should be taking that and directing it to other places.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a dry retention, correct?
Retention pond, it's dry mostly. The reason that I say mostly is that under the new stormwater management ordinance of Cook County, it just has to take a little bit of water, the first inch of rain that falls on the impervious surfaces, so just on the roadways, the sidewalks, the rooftops. It just has to take that little bit of water, be able to hold that little bit of water, just long enough to just kind of let it clean out, let the plants absorb it, that kind of thing.
Thank you, David. Any other questions, David? Okay, may I have a motion to approve 8B?
Any residents want to speak?
I'm sorry, resident? Is there a resident that would like to speak?
Hi, I'm Linda Enzano. I was here for the last meeting last Monday, and we live right behind the Buck Trail and actually, the two developments are like split our lot in half. And I brought a flash drive of all of the water that has caused us to have to do over $100,000 of repairs in our house. No one from the village has addressed it. We've called, we've talked to people, and it should have been taken care of because the last developer that was there cleared the lot and never did any type of drainage. They didn't sell the lots right away, so there was no drainage done, and it all ran into our yard. Do they have them up, or? Okay, so just to give you an idea, let's see. This is the lot. This shot is between Nancy Corin, the Corins, and our house. This is water that's running off of the development that you're talking about right now. All of this water is coming right off. This is right here is the new sewer that the village has put in that does not hold the water. It will not hold the water. So we recently, and so then this water all ran between our houses, and then it ran around, and then you'll see another shot that'll show how it was flowing like rivers. Gotta keep going, one more. This just shows how this used to be the walking path. They ripped up the walking path but left all the stone. So what you see here is all the water that's seeping through the stone because it's made it like a French drain. That's coming from the lots behind us, which is the lot that they're talking about developing. So all the water just seeps through. This is the work that we had to do this year. This is the walking path back there. That's the corner that we were just talking about. We had to dig up our property and actually run 6 feet down. My son's 6 foot tall, so not 6 feet, so he's 6 foot tall. We went 3 feet down to run drains and drain tiles to bring all the water away from us. And then we tapped into the village sewer, which is what Paul May had suggested that we do. So we had, this is all the path right here in this area is where the sewer's at. All underneath here is the stone that's coming from the 2 lots behind us. So it's sunk. This used to be a deck. That was our gazebo. It sunk the gazebo. It sunk the deck. It sunk our whole patio and was a river going down our side of our house and sunk the whole walkway. So everything had to be entirely ripped up. I think there's a couple more, but there's the video. So that's the walking path. This is how high the path was raised behind us, and underneath all of that is stone. So that's the other subdivision that the water was trickled. You'll see where it'll show all the water coming through. We had to raise the gazebo back up again. All of the, it had just sunk down. This is the pipe that we ran through. This is where our deck was where you see it at the level of the house. That's how high they've raised up our lot with the path being put there, back there. So they laid a whole bed of like maybe 6 or whatever the requirement is for the stone for asphalt. They put that down first, then they put the asphalt. When the path got ripped up, they only ripped up the asphalt, they never ripped up the stone. So what happened is there's now dirt over the stone that made it like a French drain. So every bit of water off of those 2 lots is coming right through the stone. And everybody along that path that has water problems is because of the water that's running off. And it's all overflow water from the property. So it's not, whether it's rainwater, whatever it is, it's running through the stone. So then in the next ones, you'll see, it's just more work done, but keep going. It's just, there's the video will show you how the water is flowing.
I think that's the last one of these.
Huh? There's 4 videos that'll show you the.
Okay, how do we get out of here?
Is it on the bottom?
Now, was this all discussed at the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Okay.
The pictures were not shown, though, nor were the videos.
Go all the way down. Oh, no, here's. Okay, here. This is that there's 4 of them.
Recommended.
That's fine, recommended setting. Okay, That's our backyard. This is from the rainwater that came off the lot behind us. And here we're showing you that. So all of the dirt area there's stone underneath it. And here, this is all the water that's seeping underneath the stone from the lot behind us. That lot is still not developed, and they still did not regrade it according to whatever grading it should be to keep it off of the properties. And there's 3 more, you'll see. Now this one, I think it looks like it's the same one, but it's going to show you more of like, I think. But okay, so anyway, this water is all water that's settling there, but it looks like it was just puddling there, but it's not, because this is all trickling down. It's actually coming from underneath the stone. And that's on that side. And that's the highest point. And then on the other side is Peterix, and they flow the other way. And then this is where the water runs. Then it was coming from the top. This ran all the way across through our deck, or behind our deck, sunk the deck, sunk the second patio, and then this is going out to the drive. This was a patio.
Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Linda Inzano.
I'm sorry?
Linda Inzano.
Linda? Now, Linda, was this all done, this footage all before you took the corrective action?
Before we did the changes?
Before you did the work with the drain tiles?
Oh, yeah. No, this was done just so we could show everybody, because I brought this to Paul May. When we went for approval for everything that we were going to do, I videoed all this and brought it to him. He walked out there, he saw everything. So this is the same thing. You've had other neighbors complain about this. This is where you would walk in the backyard and you thought it was dry, and then it's like deep. And it's all that it looks like you'll hear people refer to it as bubbling up. It's not that it's bubbling up, it's coming from under the stone, and it's just saturated because it's just sleeping through the ground is what it is. And see, that's all from the back. So now it goes from there over, and that's the high point, it runs back down over to the Corin side, which then half of this lot is the old subdivision, and half is where they're planning to do their development. This is just all, this is every rain that we get is like this.
And when was this footage taken?
This was a combination of things. See, look at this. This was our patio, and our little dock. And that's the whole thing. It's sunk. And if you could see where the stoop is, it dropped the stoop about this much, so you couldn't even get out. See? And besides that, so because of all of this damage, we had to put 10 pylons under the entire side of our house to keep the house from falling. So, needless to say, we are really concerned about the water. And so then the other part that's the part that's all raised. There's, I think the last one.
Can you put up a map on, so we know exactly where her house is compared
Nancy's?
Compared to this development?
Did it go through again?
Well, just don't,
Where our house is compared to this?
yeah.
Yes.
So we're right there.
My laser pointer isn't working.
No,
You're up over there.
no. Oh.
So you're in the southeastern corner?
Yeah, Sharp Park, right. So we're this lot, it literally comes in right in between. Both of the subdivisions come right in the middle of our lot. So that's the high point here, and it runs this way, and it's supposed to run to the swale by Corin's, but because there was so much water flow, it was also supposed to go between our houses, but they couldn't put it between the houses because there's such a variance in height between our driveway and theirs that they had to run a French drain to try to keep the water that comes just naturally over. And so they don't, Dave was out there today, right? And you can't run the water between our houses, which is what it's showing it to go, showing where it's supposed to go, right? Yeah. So they can't run the water there. And the storm sewer that we tapped into now does not handle the flow of the water that's already there.
Well, Dave's already done that. She just wanted to show you.
So all the work you did is for nothing?
No. So Paul had us run, so we took all of the water, all of our downspouts, everything. There's no water that comes off the house. It's all natural water. Everything that comes there from the roof goes all underground. Everything is tapped to the sewers, so there's no extra water. All the water you're seeing is water from rain and from the other lots.
And that will still occur?
Yes.
So Linda, are you concerned with the McNaughton plan to take care of the water? Or are you confident after talking to Dave, Mr. Preissig, that it is going, I mean, obviously it has to be done correctly, but you're just voicing your concern that it is done correctly?
Well, they are still saying that it's going to have, well, first of all, if they have a retention pond that's anywhere behind the path, the water is still going to seep in ground, and it's still going to seep and fall, in the natural path, which is going to be to the low point, which is our lots. And it's going to seep through the stone that the village has left there. So what I'm saying is that path, unless that stone is removed, it's a natural flow of water right onto our lots. So even if they dig the retention pond down, it's still water that's sitting there that could flow into the ground and flow right through the stone and right back onto our lots again. Then they said that the overflow was going to go over, I think flow over the top, but again, it's falling in our yard again and there's nowhere for it to go.
I would ask that the developer speak to this and specifically how your plan and your detention area and your stormwater management is going to solve her problems.
Or not make them worse, anyway, yeah.
And Dave, you join them too?
I'm going to bring up John Green.
Okay.
John Green is the engineer.
Should I leave?
Yeah.
I think John Green can talk more specific and accurately about how the stormwater is what it's gonna do, where it's gonna go, and the volumes. I feel with the development work that we've done with John and even some other outside agencies, that putting the retention in this eastern area of the property is only gonna help anyone downhill, because that is the natural path that the water's gonna go. Obviously, this is a 5-acre piece. Right now, currently, I would say 2/3 of it is going to the east just naturally. So that water that this resident's been having for the last, how many years she's been there, because the current existing house has been there since the late 70s. Obviously, we're going to grab and obtain and contain most of that water. I know in the Plan Commission meeting last week, they had asked us to look at taking our overflow and rerouting it not to the storm sewer that was here, which is what Paul May had requested us to do in staff meetings that we've had previous, and take it 200 feet to the south, which would tie into Cross Creek's overflow and creek, and John can speak more to that, which my group is willing to do. It's obviously an added expense for them, and it was something outside of what staff had kind of recommended to us in previous meetings with them, but we understand their concerns. Obviously, we're here to do the right thing from the beginning. How we operate from a developer and builder. We want to play good neighbor, and we want to make sure this gets done right the first time. But I'll let John Green, I guess, speak more to the engineering behind it, because that's kind of his work.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Green with Engineering Resource Associates, located on West Avenue in Warrenville, Illinois. And not to repeat what Bill said, but just to add on, currently about 3/4 of the property does drain due east. It just follows Mother Nature and the natural flow of topography. Water flows downhill. Our detention pond is located at the lowest point of the property. And the good news is for the neighboring properties to the east in Burr Oaks, Glen South, is currently the site has no stormwater detention on it. So any runoff that hits the site, the little bit soaks into the ground, the rest of it in the medium and big storms all drains over land, consistent with those photos that the neighbor had shown earlier. But what we're going to do, consistent with the county and local ordinance, is provide stormwater detention storage. We're going to have a detention pond that's going to store approximately 4 to 4.5 feet of water over an area of around 30,000 square feet. and consistent with what was requested by staff and the developer testified to. We're no longer going to drain any of our water east here, but instead the stormwater pond that's located in this area will be piped towards the south into a newer storm system that was designed in the Cross Creek subdivision. Then that water is being conveyed towards the creek that runs along County Line Road, where there's adequate capacity. So in summary, there will be a much more better managed stormwater system for this area, and there will be marked improvements in the surrounding drainage. If you have any questions, I can be available.
Trustees, do you have questions of, starting with Tony? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let's start.
No, go ahead.
Trustee Francis?
Will there be seepage that the resident alluded to from the detention pond underneath the property line into her backyard? Or will it have a clay liner or some sort of liner?
Yeah. Dry ponds, as we know them, aren't required to have clay liners per se, but we will make sure that the berm is constructed of proper density and compaction. We're still waiting for soil borings to come back on the property. I imagine there'll be adequate clay on the property, and that any berming constructed will utilize that clay.
So you'll do what's necessary to prevent the seepage then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Grasso? Mr. Wallace?
So you will be retaining all the water and moving it away from the east?
That's correct.
Okay, so in theory, then, the only water that the property owner should get is just whatever rainfall
That is correct.
happens?
Yes.
Go ahead,
No.
There will be no natural flow over the property. The bottom of this detention pond that's proposed under consideration tonight will be piped to the south underground.
And it'll hold a 50-year rain,
It will hold, better than that, it will hold a 100-year rain event.
which we get every other year.
It's the rain event that has the 1% chance of happening each and every year.
So it will hold a 100-year rain.
What about stormwater that may come from the south and go northeast? Right.
The natural slope of the terrain is this direction, towards the east.
You'll be piping that way. Okay, so, but the property that she indicated was water coming from the southeast, where will that water go? That, right where your hand is, where will that water go?
This is the Cross Creek subdivision.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but where does it go now?
There's my personal experience reminds me that these few lots are still undeveloped. And I'd have to refer back, or maybe David could speak to this, to the master engineering plan for the Cross Creek subdivision. I would expect that there may need to be some fine grading as part of the final construction and final development plans.
Good.
I wasn't involved with that original design, but there probably would be some marked improvement.
Is there a
once
home
those
there
homes are
now?
built.
There's one lot, I think, left over there.
Excuse me, Linda, we're unable to hear you unless you're on the microphone, so, but if you could just wait until the end, we'll have you bring you back for any clarification. Anything else, Steve?
No, I'm just curious, because the resident indicated she was getting water from both the south lot there, and that subdivision, and also the Buck Trail subdivision. So it's clear that the water coming from west to east will fall into the detention basin, which is going to be a good thing from what I'm understanding, but I was just curious about what was going to happen in the south. And you're telling me that there's still swales and grading to be done, Dave. I don't know if you're familiar with that, then that would also help the situation.
Dave, do you want to
Who's going to do that?
address it?
As part of the Cross Creek development, there's a bit of a swale behind here, and it's an undeveloped lot. What we'll pay attention to, of course, is when this lot is developed, that swale is maintained or even improved further to take more. There's a bit of a high point as we walk through her backyard, that this part kind of goes this way, and the Cross Creek kind of comes at it, and then comes at the swale and goes that way. But the Cross Creek swale kind of does exist till today.
Okay.
And that will be the same, that won't change right now? No.
Any other trustees? Questions for the engineer with
So,
Public
David,
Works?
because the resident is lower than the Buck Trail subdivision, you're comfortable with that outlet capturing the stormwater that is currently going into their backyards?
Right, there's really kind of a ridge line in here where the majority of that water really all goes into her area.
Right.
And from the house too, it all really goes to that area. So that's a substantially large area. And now they've intercepted all that
Okay.
and instead directed it down in a pipe underground to the south.
Great. Any other questions? Any other discussion? And just for clarification, I have Doug Pollock. I think you're the right person to ask this question. Explain exactly what, for the residents, what we're approving here, and also what would come forward, what would come in the future as far as the actual stormwater plan and all the final details of this subdivision.
Sure. You're approving a preliminary plat with preliminary engineering. And by preliminary, we mean that there's just enough information here to be able to determine compliance with the basics of the zoning ordinance, the subdivision ordinance, and the stormwater ordinance. Enough information to show that they can get the 5 lots that they're proposing and that they're dedicating a large enough outlot to accommodate the required volume of stormwater detention that's required by stormwater ordinance. They will have to, the developer will have to, if this is approved, the developer will come back with final engineering plans, which will be a very large, thick, multi-page document with detailed grading plans, detailed sketches of how storm sewers are installed, the size of the storm sewer pipes, water mains, sanitary sewers, et cetera, all of and the street improvements as well. That final engineering will be reviewed by the village engineer. They will not be allowed to record a final plat creating the lots until the final engineering is approved and until they post a letter of credit for 125% of the cost of all of the subdivision improvements, including the streets, utilities, and stormwater improvements. Once we have that letter of credit, once the final plat is recorded, then they will be allowed to begin construction, and they'll have 2 years to finish the subdivision improvements. They won't be able to start houses until the stormwater improvements are substantially done and operational, and the street and all the other subdivision improvements are operational. And then they'll be able to begin construction of houses.
Great. Okay, thank you. Trustee Grasso?
I was just going to say, based upon the Plan Commission's recommendation and having confidence in our village engineer and the McNaughton builders that this will be done and improve the area, and also knowing that I can say Ms. Inzano as a friend, and that we would follow up and make sure that her condition is certainly not aggravated and hopefully will be made better, I would like to make a motion to approve the plat of survey.
And may I have a second?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Discussion on the motion?
I'm sorry? Discussion on the motion.
Thank you. I appreciate the developer listening to the residents, taking into account their concerns, extending the outfall to the south. I know it's an additional expense, but it will greatly improve the situation. And I want to thank you for that. And also want to thank the residents for speaking out. I've talked to the residents to the north of the Inzanos. They experience similar problems, water percolating up in their backyard, flooding, not incidental ponding, but flooding and rivers running through their backyards. And this is one step that will help to alleviate that problem. So I'm confident in your approach. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Grasso?
Yes.
Trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Bolus.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0, and, sorry, Trustee Grasso?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if staff can look into this path and the rocks underneath that may be an issue for other residents too, and if we should have removed more than just the asphalt on the top. Not to be answered now, but I would appreciate any insight into that. Thank you.
And, great. And thank you very much for your attention to detail and handling that. I also I haven't talked to his father in about 20 years, but they built our house 30 years ago, and the floodwater, stormwater was never an issue. They did a fine job, and but thank you again, and thanks, John. Now we're on to considerations for 8C. Consideration of Plan Commission recommendation to approve amendment of the Estancia Planned Unit Development Ordinances, number A-834-08-04 and A-834-33-06 to permit the re-subdivision of the 3 lots to accommodate the construction of additional parking on the currently vacant Lot 3 for the benefit of a 3-story office building on Lot 2, Z-14-2015, located at 100 Harvester Drive, Estancia. Mr. Polly.
Thank you. This is a recommendation from the Plan Commission regarding a request for an amendment to the Estancia Planned Unit Development. Estancia is a 3-lot subdivision with, currently has a 1-story building on one lot, a 3-story building on the second lot, and the third lot is vacant and is planned for a 3rd office building. The developer is seeking to re-subdivide the property so that the 3-story office building and the 1-story office building can have some additional parking to accommodate future tenants. It would reduce the parking available for a future building on Lot 3, but they would still have sufficient parking to accommodate an 80,000 square foot office building. The amendment then is again to allow the construction of 108 parking spaces for the existing office buildings and to approve a preliminary approval for a 4-story, 80,000 square foot office building on the vacant Lot 3. And again, sufficient parking would still remain for future building on Lot 3. This was originally slated to be on the consent agenda as the Plan Commission unanimously recommended approval of this. But there was a condition recommended by the Plan Commission that the developer remove the existing foundation that was constructed on Lot 3 and then vacated, and that be removed prior to the construction of the additional parking. The developer petitioner asked for a modification of that condition. They would like to have up to 1 year to remove it, as they are still not completely sure that they won't use that foundation, although they are pretty confident they won't. They just want to be sure before they go to the expense of removing it. So staff has recommended that that condition recommended by the Plan Commission be modified to allow them up to 1 year from the time they get the permit for the new parking lot to remove the caissons in the manner recommended by the Plan Commission. And in talking with the attorney for the petitioner, they are agreeable to that condition. Be happy to answer any questions.
Board members, do you have questions of Doug? Okay. And any residents? Would the petitioner like to address the board at all this time? Or introduce themselves?
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jim Olguin. I'm from the law firm of Goldstein, Skrodsky, Russian, Emick, and Hoff. Our offices are here at 835 McClintock Drive in the village of Blue Ridge. We concur with what the staff recommendation of 1 year extension. We've been meeting with Doug, periodically with various projects for this Lot 3. And there is a potential where, that foundation could be used. There's a considerable amount of investment in that foundation, and it's something that is definitely attractive to developers of the property. It's, just in concrete alone, almost $200,000 worth of concrete there. So for a future developer to have that, if they can mold the project around it, it's something that is beneficial. We believe that within that 1 year period of time, we'll have a project before you, and so to have that would definitely be an amenity. And then just to kind of step back on something that was earlier in the agenda, I would also like to congratulate Doug for his 20 years here. Having our offices here in the village and also having projects here in the village in the past, we've had the pleasure of working with Doug many times, and Doug always keeps the interests of the village in the forefront, but he always does it in a very pleasant and in a great manner. So when you come out of a meeting with him and he's told you that there's really no way your project is going to work, you come out of it still with a smile on your face. So we always appreciate that. He's always, he's a very forthright, and he's fair and he's honest. And as a developer's attorney, that's all you can really hope for. So, thank you, Doug, for all the work over the years that I've had a chance to work with you.
It's always nice to have a developer who hires a law firm that's inside the village also. That's. Are there any questions of him? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to approve 8C? Consideration of Plan Commission recommendation to approve the amendment of the Estancia Plan Unit Development, as I mentioned earlier, to permit the re-subdivision of the 3 lots on the currently vacant Lot 3 for the benefit of the 3-story office building located at 100 Harvester Drive.
With the understanding that the foundation can stay for 1 year.
Yes, with the conditions set forth by the Plan Commission.
With conditions set forth by the Plan Commission. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Was the condition of the Plan Commission 1 year? No.
Ah, okay.
That was the Plan Commission's recommendation. The developer is asking for the 1 year extension of 1 year.
That's fine.
So you're
For a 1 year extension,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, roll call?
Trustee Bolus?
Yes.
Trustee Scampa?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Grasso?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
5-0.
Motion passes 5-0 on 8D. Update on general fund operations for fiscal year 14-15 and first quarter of fiscal year 15-16.
Yes, as we've done for the last several years, Jerry and I would like to give you a little bit of a review of how the fiscal year 14-15 ended and what it looks like for the first quarter so far in 15-16. Then I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we've done so far this fiscal year to hold the line on expenses as a result of the problems with the state of Illinois. So, Jerry?
For fiscal year ending April 30th, 2015, we had budgeted revenues at $8,275,605, and our actual came in at $8,249,417. This is just our general fund. So we were under budget on a revenue side of $26,188. Some of the highlights here: property taxes, they came in $27,000 less than budgeted. Our municipal sales tax came in at $10,000 under budget. Utility taxes, which are the gas, electric, and telecom, they underperformed by about $72,000, primarily through the telecommunication tax under budget at $76,510. Places of eating tax, under budget about $6,000. Real highlight here, strong point, is permit and fees. They came in $190,000 over budget, so excess revenues there. And, income tax, once again, flat, with about $1,400 under the budget. And interest income, we continue to live in a low interest rate environment. They came in under budget. So in general, I use the word flat about 3 times here, so that's kind of like the status of last year. No, kind of right at the budget, no growth in revenues for the year. Expenditure side, we budgeted $8,250,605, and the actual came in at $7,977,212. And that was $273,393 under our budget, well-controlled expenditures. With that, we were able to provide some additional funding to the pathway and capital improvement funds, $142,000 to capital improvement fund and $118,000 to the sidewalk pathway fund. Quickly down the line here, boards and commissions, $49,000 under budget, and that was due to some savings in legal fees. Administration, pretty much on target. Community development was about $87,000 over budget, and typically that what happens when you have such high building permit revenues. You have additional building and zoning enforcement fees. Finance on target. Central services, this was before adding the 2 budget amendments. Some significant savings in the police department at $197,000 under budget, and that was due to lower personnel costs, and then significant savings in gasoline due to lower prices and some more fuel-efficient vehicles. And under public works and buildings and ground, about $105,000 savings, and that was due to lower personnel costs and also various contractual services, and as like the police, lower fuel costs. So next year, just in summary, the general fund, we had budgeted originally with $25,000 surplus, and revenues came in under budget at $26,188. Expenditures came in under budget at $273,393. 2 transfers here to capital projects to fund future road programs, and 1 to the sidewalk pathway fund for future improvements. So that brought our actual surplus down to $12,205. And for next year, we've planned for a $80,385 surplus. So we have 3 months of activity in. That's our first quarter, May, June, and July. Right now we're running about $84,000 above our budget projections. With municipal sales tax, with 3 months in, $20,000 under our estimates. Permits and fees started off, utility taxes, they are still under our estimates currently. And permit fees, they started out strong with $12,000 to the good, and strong sales income tax at about $95,000 to the good. And our interest income, we did just leave that budget flat, so you know, right now we're on target with our interest income. So
I think what you're seeing here, you know, are that, as Jerry mentioned, revenues are flat. We're happy to see that, you know, our income tax making that number and exceeding that number so far in just the first quarter, so that's good news. But this is what's looming over us in all municipalities throughout the state of Illinois. This is the governor's suggestion, which is in his turnaround budget, to reduce our allotment of the LGDF, the Local Government Distributive Fund, which is the state income tax, by 50%. We budgeted $1,445,340. 50% of that is $522,670. So that's the amount that we could easily see go away, not only this year but in all future years. And it is certainly a major concern that we've had. So with that in mind, we put several items on hold, and I just want to confirm with the board that we should continue to do that. Now, if there are some things here that you would like us to pursue, we can continue to do so. We got plenty of time in the fiscal year to do so, but so far we've put them on hold. Jerry mentioned the surplus that we're starting out with. We have failed to replace 3 positions. We've got holds on a part-time receptionist in administration, the police officer, which is the community policing officer, and those are the costs of the salary and benefits there, and then the police department secretary, which includes their benefits as well. And I remember we have hired a temporary employee to help with the load in the police department, but that really isn't the long-term answer. But at least in the short term, we put a hold on that. We've cut out 2 national conferences this year, myself and Doug's, so that's a savings of $4,000. License plate recognition camera, that was a $40,000 item in the budget. We have put a hold on that project. We have the Burr Ridge sign. Remember a discussion we had about the sign in the front of the building for $6,000? We've got a hold on that. Automatic door closures, we were talking about having automatic door closures in front of the Village Hall. Here we haven't had them forever, so I thought we could hold off on that. And then we talked about previously the Restaurant Week promotion, which is $25,000. So that all adds up to about $352,000.
By the way, can you give the board an update on any progress that we've heard through Springfield or through the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference on the LGDF?
Well, it's not a, I don't have a good answer for you. There's no answer, really. The governor's sticking to his guns. He wants what he wants, you know, his turnaround agenda. Obviously the Democrats in the legislature won't go along with him on these things. So there's a stalemate. And I don't foresee necessarily that changing. I've heard people say that they're not going to make any decisions until after the primaries in February. And my concern personally is that the longer they go, the harder it's going to be not only to cut, but to find additional revenue. You know, early on it was, well, let's just raise the income tax. Well, they're not going to be able to raise the income tax now for at least 2015. Everybody has been paid. There's no reduction in people's paychecks to cover the cost of the income tax increase, and it would be unbelievable if they were to pass a income tax increase after the fact, and then all that money's been spent, and then people would have to come up with a check to the government at the end of the year. I just don't see that happening. And so where does the money come from? The easiest place for that money to come from is the LGDF, the MFT, which they've already put a hold on, and other revenue, some of which doesn't affect us, gaming revenue, and some other revenues that they've withheld. Now,
can you give a little bit explanation more of the LGDF? Where it originated, what, 30 years ago?
Well, when the income tax was passed, there was a lot of discussion on whether local governments should be allowed or to have the ability to pass their own income tax. The legislature during that process, during that whole time when they created that new constitution, the Constitutional Committee decided that no municipality should not have their own ability to have their own income tax, but that they would share in the state income tax. And so that's been in place since the beginning.
Lifeblood of so many villages.
Well, absolutely it is. And it is a major concern not only to the village of Burr Ridge, but to all municipalities. And believe me, there's been a lot of lobbying going on, making our case that this is extremely important and will have a major, major impact on us. Now, if I could just continue, there's some also additional transfers that we normally make out of the general fund that we have not made. The $82,000 that we projected this year to be transferred to the Sidewalk Pathway Fund to pay for those 2 projects. We're going to get to that one project a little next item here. And then traditionally we have the Equipment Replacement Fund, which comes out of various department budgets. And then the money that goes into the Information Technology Fund for replacement of equipment. So we've got a hold on all those numbers at the moment. And although not directly tied to these funds, I have placed a hold on some of the equipment replacement, because if you don't fund the Equipment Replacement Fund, which is already short, of money. And I didn't want to spend these big ticket items until we knew where we were at. And so the aerial lift van, which we need to replace, and a 3-ton dump truck that we need to replace, we've placed those on hold. And until we know more in the Information Technology Fund, I wanted to put a hold on the purchase of any additional wireless equipment. So those are things that we are also placing on hold. Now, here's another thing. I'm not sure everybody is aware, but after the first couple of months, we've not been receiving our motor fuel tax allotment. And we have budgeted $256,500. We've only received $38,020. We also anticipate having interest income for some of that money, which we wouldn't realize. And so we have a potential shortfall, almost $225,000. That money's been spent. That money was part of the road program. If we don't ever receive that money, we're going to have to go into equity to cover the cost of the road program. And I don't know what the state's doing with that money. I asked a couple legislators on Saturday, and they didn't even know what was going on. And so really, it's going to be the governor who will make that decision, I'm sure. But again, that's what I'm trying to say, is that if they wait and wait and wait, and this pot of money is just sitting there accumulating, it's going to be very easy for them to just sweep it out and say, you know what, we need to take that. And then we will be out that amount of money. Okay, so these are real issues that are looming and are a major concern. I can't overemphasize that.
How can he so easily put a hold on the motor fuel tax?
Well,
when the LGDF was something that's been
the motor fuel tax are, I think they're playing games with some of these numbers, but they're basically saying they don't have the legal authority because it's not part of the budget. They don't have a budget, and therefore they don't have the legal authority to expend those funds. And how they can say that with the MFT, but they can't. They can still give us our income tax. I think it's, I think they're playing games, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Now, this next slide shows that we do, that's all the bad news. Some of the good news that we should realize is that we do have $4.6 million in equity, which represents 55% of the annual fund expenditures. This is what I think the governor and his people are thinking about municipal government, saying, gee, you've got these great surpluses, you don't need that money, and therefore we'll take it from you. Obviously, we've been fiscally responsible over the years. We've built this surplus up. In the event of a catastrophe, a major issue, or a major recession, which we used a considerable amount of this money during the last recession. But that's why that money is there. And although we're in good shape, again, that's a one-time revenue. Once you spend it, it's gone. There's no replenishment of that equity. Also, over the years, we've had good luck in terms of our liability insurance, and we've been able to build up a cash reserve in our IRMA, which is Intergovernmental Risk Management Agency pool, in the amount of $569,639. We keep that money there, and it's really off the books. It's not part of the audit and part of our revenues, simply because, well, for two reasons. One, because if we do have a catastrophe in regards to liability, the money will be there. Some years there is a surplus. There could be a year where there's a deficit, and that's where that money would come from. But also, IRMA is able to invest in other types of instruments that we could not invest in. And so their rate of return has been very good over the years, and that's why we've decided to keep that money there. And then lastly, this was talked about last week, or last board meeting, but there is $850,000 in escrow for the 71st Street Bridge project that was provided to us by Opus. Now, we can use that money for any purpose, but obviously we've earmarked it for that 71st Street Bridge project, and until we see the total build-out of the corporate park, I would be hesitant to use those dollars, but they are available if absolutely necessary.
Okay.
Now, you've heard me mention this before, but, where could we get additional revenue if we lost that $500,000? We do not have, we have the additional 1/4% non-home rule sales tax. It could generate $300,000 to $325,000. I certainly would not recommend that. Reinstatement of vehicle stickers, that could generate some real money. I think we have over 10,000 vehicles in Burr Ridge that are registered in the community, and for which we don't receive any revenue. We used to have vehicle stickers years ago. We got rid of those. What we did was we increased the telecommunication tax from 4% to 6%, I think is what we could do at that time, and that made up the revenue that we were generating with vehicle stickers, and so we were able to get rid of the vehicle stickers. That was many, many years ago. So, but again, that source of revenue is available to us. And again, that would be an operating revenue if we needed it. And then finally, again, I will remind you, and I will keep reminding you, because the time's coming up here where if we are going to move forward on a referendum question in November of 2016, we need to be thinking about that. Again, what we're talking about here is extending the tax amount currently paid by property owners for the Bedford Park Lake Michigan water main project. That $520,000 is basically what the taxpayers are paying every year for that particular project. That project will be paid off in 2016. So if we went to the voters and asked them to maintain the same level of tax, not an increase, but maintain the same level of tax, we could generate an additional $520,000 a year. Where would that money go? I would recommend that we would let the taxpayers know that we would be using that for capital projects, for the roads, for the sidewalks, and other stormwater improvements and so forth that we need to be able to do, and that we've been deferring for years, and that would certainly be a shot in the arm, and would certainly take the pressure off the general fund to have to transfer money every year to the capital projects fund, which is what we've been doing for the last several years to be able to fund those capital projects. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. I'd like to hear any comments from the board. If you feel like any of these things we've placed on hold we shouldn't and we should go forward with, or do you feel we should just hold the line where we're at with these items?
The police officer, we're paying overtime on the police now, correct? So how much are we really saving?
Well, that was just to do the DARE program, and we said it would not exceed $25,000. And the chief, I think, would tell us that we probably won't come to that number at the moment. So that's kind of where we're at with the DARE program.
And we're okay without having the additional, because the DARE officer is not on the street at all, correct?
That's correct.
And we're okay with the number of officers we have on the street?
Yes, we are. We don't have the shifts balanced, but right now we're fine with that officer doing those community policing duties, primarily DARE.
And the officers that are picking up the overtime, we're not overtaxing people?
No, because like Steve said, I'm projecting we're going to come in a lot less. We're doing some schedule changes, and we're trying to keep it down low. And that's the last thing I want to do is burn out the officers on overtime, because we had that a couple years ago. So, but we're watching that. The community policing officer, Bob Worth, he's still working patrol too.
Oh, okay.
So when we can get him away and work the street, we do.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing double duty.
Okay.
That kind of relieves the burden of the overtime on the patrol officers.
All right. Thank you.
Trustee Bowles, any other questions?
No.
Trustee Schiappa, any questions on some of the items that Steve mentioned?
It's difficult to make decisions. I think Steve has made some good recommendations on things that we need to hold the line on. Until we hear back from the stalemate down in Springfield, it's hard to make any decisions. But if we stay fiscally conservative, and I believe we're taking the right steps.
All right. Trustee Murphy, anything?
I would agree. I think that the line items that are on hold now should probably continue to be on hold. It doesn't look like anything on there is urgent. I the one I would worry about the most is what Diane brought up, the police officer, but if Chief Madden thinks we're doing okay without him, I would continue to hold off.
Trustee Wallace?
On the motor fuel tax, if we don't know by budgeting time what, if we will receive the MFT or not, will we then just reduce the road program?
Well, again, that money that we're talking about was already
Yes,
spent in the
right.
2015 program.
But assuming we won't get this, we're not going to get new ones anyway.
Well, that could be, and that's, again, the reason for the referendum. But, yeah, it'll have a major impact on the equity in the fund for this year, and then reduce the amount that we have available for next year. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, the Street Policy Committee will have to make a recommendation, the village board will have to decide, but, yeah, it's going to have a major impact, and the dollars aren't going to be there. I mean, you'll have to make up that amount. You have to make up that $250,000 somehow, some way, and it's not going to come from the general fund, I can guarantee you that, even in the best of times.
Or reduce the program.
Or reduce the program.
Trustee Grasso?
I agree with my fellow trustees that the only thing that made me question was the police officer, since that seems to be the only line item that has to do with safety. So knowing that the other items are not related to safety, I would say, yeah, let's keep them all on hold. And then in terms of the referendum, my question is whether or not this referendum can be specific enough to state that the monies used will be used for X, Y, and Z. And if that's the case, then I'm all for putting off the referendum, because then it's up to the citizens to decide if they want to approve it or not.
Great. Trustee Francis?
Well, I appreciate all the work that staff has done, Steve and Jerry and staff, to identify these line items. I know a lot of hard thought went into them. These are all reasonable items that can be put on hold without jeopardizing the health and safety and welfare of our residents. My concern, again, is about the police officer, and I trust Chief Madden's judgment to continue to put the police officer on hold, hiring the police officer on hold. I know that he would come to us before us, and if there was an urgent need, that he would address that to us at the proper time. So, I also appreciate the fine work that staff has done to come in under budget, the $200,000 under budget for the expenditures for 14-15. Appreciate that. So, thank you for all of your good work.
Steve, any other comments from you or from Jerry? Okay. Well, thank you for that vital update. We're going to move on to 8E, consideration to award contract for the construction of a sidewalk on German Church Road from Greystone Court to Kyline Road. And
Yes, I'll take this. I've got some really good news for you. I think everybody saw the email that I had sent out. Now, on Friday, when I wrote this report, it was pretty gloomy in terms of how we were going to pay for the German Church Road sidewalk. We had gone out to bid again for this project. The low bid came in from Landmark Contractors in the amount of $638,259.64. I had mentioned to you that in addition was the construction engineering, and with only $180,000 in grant money, that would have left us about $218,000 short, which we would have had to find. And with the 79th Street project, which we just approved, being a little bit over, we would have depleted the entire pathway fund of the revenues that's available there that hasn't been earmarked for things that we've already spent money on or appropriated funds for. And we would have had to come up with another, I think, $77,000 or so, somewhere else to be able to cover the cost of this project. But the good news is that we found out today that we were able to receive the grant that we had looked to receive and that we pursued, and we were, as I say, fortunate to get. On Friday, we were under the funding level, but when the committee meeting actually took place today, Dave was there and stood up and told them that this project actually came in under the estimate, which was shown in their formulas and so forth. and the fact that it was under the estimate, and because of the fact that this is a ready-to-go project, they made a decision to fund the German Church Road project. And so you can see the grant increased from $180,000 to $478,694. And so instead of which we had budgeted $450,000, and as I mentioned before, the project cost comes in at $638,000. And so what happened here is that we budgeted $270,000 plus the $45,000 for construction engineering. That means we had $315,000 budgeted, and only our share now has been reduced to $159,564 plus the $74,522 in engineering equals $234. So we're actually under budget. And so we have a savings of $80,913, which is close to the $82,000 that I told you we had to transfer.
Right.
So even though as much as I'd like to transfer that money because it helps the next project, which is County Line Road, if we absolutely had to wait a year or find some other revenue in order to balance the general fund, we could put a hold on that. But the good news is that the project came in under the engineer's estimate. We were able to get the grant. Our costs have been significantly reduced. I know the residents are very much in favor of this project. I know the Pathway Commission is very much in favor of this project, and my recommendation is that we go ahead and award the contract, or recommend that IDOT award the contract to Landmark Landscaping in the amount of $638,259.64.
Any questions of Steve's phenomenal news from, when was that meeting? When did that meeting occur?
Just this afternoon.
This afternoon.
There's also in your email some discussion on the County Line Road project by Catherine
We
Levy,
are
correct?
right under the line for County Line Road, unfortunately.
What if we include the east side, or the, west side too?
I'm sorry?
What if we include the west side also? Because there was that portion,
Yeah, but that wasn't a part of this project. You can't,
but to redo.
we'd have to do it next year. You couldn't add that now. But the story with County Line Road is, remember we applied for additional grant funding for that project. We're under the line. That's the bad news. So we didn't get the grant for County Line Road. Potential good news is that the project above it is a $3.4 million sidewalk project that the Forest Preserve District wants to do. And after our project with German Church Road there's only like $700,000 left. And so obviously the Forest Reserve is looking for $2-point-some-odd million in grant money to cover their cost of their project. They're only going to get $700,000. They may say, the heck with it, we're not going to be able to do it. They have between now and November to decide. If they decide to leave the money on the table, guess what? We're next in line. And that $700,000 would then cover County Line Road on the east side. And then we'd be able to do final engineering over the winter and be able to go to construction on County Line Road next year. Now, if we don't get that grant, then we're going to be short. And then the decision will be, well, where are we going to find the money for that project? We'll have to make some decisions at that time. Maybe we'll hold off another year and wait to see if we can get grant funding, the following year, or use equity to cover the cost. So that's all going to be part and parcel of the discussion during the budget, where we're going to be looking at the road program, as you indicated, and where we're at with that, plus any other money that we may have available for capital projects. But I think that's a discussion for another day. What we have in front of us is German Church Road, and the money is there, and I definitely think we should go forward.
Trustee Schiappa, any questions of Steve?
So I think this is great, and now that I want to say thank you to Village Engineer Dave Pressig for bringing this back alive, and we're so excited to see this project go through.
Fantastic news. Very excited about this. It'll be great for the residents down there to be able to walk safely along the road.
Yes. Anything else, Trustee Bowles?
No.
Trustee Grasso?
If there's any residents.
And Trustee Francis, anything?
Thank you, David, for your efforts, and another project that will certainly benefit the residents in many ways. Thank you.
Are any residents that would like to address the board at this time? this topic?
On this topic, or is this the
On
resolution?
this topic.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we haven't.
The only comment I would make is that I am very impressed with how detailed and involved you are in looking at all of this and trying to obviously stretch the cash as far as you can and do the best for the village. So that's great.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to approve? I'm sorry.
My name is Judy Guthrie. I live at 8268 Greystone Court in Bridle Path. Said Francis is president of Bridle Path and is unable to be here. I am vice president of Bridle Path. But I just want to thank the board for all the work and the support they have given to this project. We feel that this sidewalk will be appreciated by all the walkers and bikers who use German Church Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Thomas, 7515 Drew Avenue. One thing that I think maybe we should reconsider the renewing the bond for the water, just because one thing that didn't come up, if I remember correctly, Paul May made a statement that the water tower was going to need painting in the near future, and the cost on that was going to be over $1 million. So, you know, in order to keep.
I understand your concern, but you're mixing apples and oranges. The bond was just for the Bedford Park water main project. Once it's paid off, it's gone. Okay, we have revenue, you know, coming in from the water fund to be able to cover the cost of the painting of the water tower. Now, I mean, it's a good point that maybe that $520,000, some of it could be earmarked for water projects. There's no question. In the future, you have the ability to do so, but one doesn't negate the other. And the cost of the things you're talking about come out of the water fund, not out of the general fund.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else? Okay. Now may I have a motion to approve 8E, consideration to award contract for the construction of a sidewalk on German Church Road from Greystone Court to County Line Road.
So moved.
Okay.
We have so moved. We have first and a second.
Second. You do.
And may I have roll call, please?
I'm sorry. Who seconded?
Let's go with Paul.
Tony did? Okay.
They both said it at the same
Yeah.
time.
The timer first. so.
Unanimous.
Trustee Grasso?
Yes.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Bolus?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
5-0.
Motion passes 5-0. Great news, and thank you, residents, for really pushing that along and for supporting the village every step of the way. So thank you.
We should also thank the Plan Commission for their diligent work. Or the Pathway Commission, I'm sorry, Pathway.
Absolutely. Okay, 8F, discussion concerning the possible regulation, prohibition on the operation use of drones in the village.
Yes.
Those unmanned aircraft systems which have become more popular, otherwise known as UAS. And Steve?
Yes, Trustee Paul Murphy had asked that this item be placed on the agenda for discussion after receiving a complaint from a resident whose daughter saw a drone hovering outside her bedroom window in Burr Ridge. Obviously, that's a major concern. That's something we can't allow continue. But the issue to how to deal with the advent of these unmanned aerial systems, as you indicated, what we call drones, has been a major issue throughout the country for probably similar reasons. If you look on the internet nowadays, you always see stories about both lawful and unlawful uses of this new technology. There's a lot of communities that are considering banning drones altogether. We are still looking into the possibilities of what our legal rights are in terms of what we can do to regulate these drones, since the FAA regulates navigable airspace. So obviously we have to create regulations that fall underneath those FFA guidelines. So this is all new law, and it's something that we're going to have to continue to research. But I don't think there's any question that, to the extent that we can, I would certainly recommend that we attempt to try to regulate this situation. Scott, I've asked Scott to be here tonight to kind of address this issue, tell us what he knows about it, and where he thinks the law is going in regard to this matter.
I think you turned it off.
You gotta push it out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So as Steve mentioned, the field of regulation of these unmanned aircraft, the technology is outstripping, due to the pace of the evolution of the technology, both recreational and commercial, is outstripping the federal regulations that exist regarding the control and operation of unmanned systems. It's outstripping the state law, although we do have some state regulation, which I'll mention. And there is very little local regulation at this point, other than you see the ordinance that's been included in your materials for this evening from Willowbrook. Willowbrook's proposed approach, or at least the approach they're discussing, as I understand it, is a moratorium, a 2-year moratorium on, as far as I can tell from their proposed regulation, on recreational hobbyist use of unmanned systems. The other resolution that you have in your packet is from Berkeley, California, I believe, and they take the opposite approach at this point, indicating they're going to ban all commercial uses of unmanned systems, which are now regulated by the FAA, and allow hobbyist and recreational uses in a relatively unlimited fashion, except for surveillance and cameras, which may be one of the bigger concerns of the use of those systems. So just basically, I don't want to, I don't want to bore you with all of these statutes and regulations that apply here, but we have 2 trends that are upon us relative to regulations. One is at the federal level, the president has impaneled a commission that just spoke on this issue regarding federal regulation of these systems and to what extent they propose to regulate them, and a proposed set of regulations that was due at the end of September from the FAA. That set of regulations has been proposed. It does not impose particularly strict regulations on recreational and hobbyist uses, non-commercial uses of drones that are less than 55 pounds and do not ascend higher than 400 feet. The navigable airspace in the United States is controlled at 500 feet by the FAA, meaning nothing, no local regulation or state regulation exists except as authorized by the FAA above 500 feet. That's where aircraft travel, except for helicopters. The FAA still regulates all airspace in the United States down to the ground. They just don't have regulations that tell us much about what happens in that lower 400 feet. So at this point, the federal regulation exists for any navigable airspace above 500 feet. Burr Ridge, and I wouldn't imagine the village is proposing to regulate systems that fly that high, that fly 500 feet in the air. So their regulation addresses that space, and then it also addresses any other public or commercial use of an unmanned system down to the ground that has to first petition the FAA for permission to use airspace. So commercial users, public users, anyone other than a recreational hobbyist has to receive FAA permission, a certificate of approval or a waiver in order to operate an unmanned system. Now those systems generally look like at a construction site. Someone might be using an unmanned drone to surveil that system, to surveil the construction, the progress of the construction, to move around the exterior envelope of that building in a close fashion to monitor the construction. For public uses, there are a number of public uses. The village of Lake Zurich, I know, has petitioned for and received a certificate of approval to zone the whole town, to map the village of Lake Zurich from, I think, 300 feet in the air, 350 feet in the air. So that permission is granted exclusively through the FAA at this point. That is not an area that can be co-regulated at this point or preempted by local regulation. So what we are left with, what is not clear at this point, or what we have the least amount of guidance on, is these recreational uses of unmanned systems. and how to best regulate those. What is not clear, although Bolingbrook is proposing to impose a complete moratorium, what is not clear is whether we can regulate it all, whether or not the FAA continues to preempt this area, and we do not have the authority, or we lack the authority, to regulate these kinds of systems in any meaningful way. We have a limited set of state regulations at this point, and those address the use of unmanned systems for law enforcement purposes. There is a prohibition, with certain exceptions, emergency exceptions, when a warrant is secured in Illinois for the use of unmanned surveillance systems for law enforcement purposes, illegal searches essentially. Other than that, we have no state guidance at this point, but there is a state task force that was approved and impaneled essentially August 18th of this year. Its report is due July 1st, 2016, I believe. There are 19 members of that commission from various disciplines and professions in the state, across the country for that matter, that are being asked or tasked with the mission of addressing the local regulation and state regulation of unmanned systems in Illinois at a height of less than 500 feet. They're not proposing to go any higher than that. To address the issues that can arise for local governments, for the state, including privacy issues, including these concerns that any number of municipalities have about ensuring that individuals' privacy on their private property is maintained and protected. So the two ordinances that you have before you, that you've been able to review before tonight, Berkeley's and Willowbrook's, are, there is no clear guidance in either federal or state law at this point as to the authority to impose these kind of moratoria. I don't believe Berkeley's is lawful on its face. The FAA does regulate commercial unmanned systems, and Berkeley is proposing to regulate in a fashion that's inconsistent with the Federal Aviation Administration, which I don't believe is constitutional, but Berkeley has its own counsel and can propose to address it as best they can. Relative to the issues here in Burr Ridge regarding privacy, there is a set of regulations. The exception that's carved out for private recreational hobbyist use of unmanned systems imposes size limitations. It imposes the maximum height at which a hobbyist unmanned system can be navigated, and it imposes additional privacy and safety regulations and restrictions that those craft are required to meet at this point that may be, I don't know if they're enough for the village at this point, but they do provide some additional protections in that area, even for unmanned private recreational systems. So it isn't as if there's no regulation and we don't have the ability to address some of these issues at this point. We do, but it is not an unlimited authority, and it still remains unclear until we have the new federal regulations, which, as I mentioned, are due, and until...
Any estimate of when that might arrive?
It's the federal government.
Yeah, it's the federal government, that's true.
They've received, you can imagine how many comments the federal government receives on an initiative like this, on a set of rules. The industry that produces these craft, recreational and commercial, must have any number of lobbyists' feedback, input on how these rules should best be crafted.
Is the comment period over?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but the regulations are still in proposed form. So the other initiative we have that should be helpful and should provide guidance is the state of Illinois. The task force that is to complete its work by July 1st, 2016, we would anticipate would come up with some state regulatory initiative to empower non-home rule municipalities to act in this area, to reasonably regulate recreational users and maybe some of the commercial users that are now permitted by the FAA. So if you have any additional questions, I can try to address those. As I mentioned, we don't have the guidance that we likely will have in the next 9 months that may clarify some of these things going forward.
Trustee Murphy, you were the one who brought it to the attention, so.
Well, this is a really big safety issue, especially when drones are coming on private property, peeking in little girls' bedrooms at night. I actually had one come to my house when, in the middle of August, we got home from a vacation, pulled in the driveway with the car service, and there was a drone hovering above my house. And I felt very violated, although it wasn't like, you know, we were outside, we were just getting our luggage in. I can imagine how a 12-year-old girl feels when you're in the privacy of your own bedroom reading at night or doing your homework and someone's peeking in your window. The difficulty is trying to catch these people. So the only thing I can really think of on how to do that is if we could somehow have people register the drones when they purchase them. Is that a possibility?
That is, for two reasons that makes sense. There's a practical reason, and that is if we had a regulatory scheme here in the village that we could enforce, that we felt comfortable enforcing, we have to be able to identify the device. It has to be traceable to somebody that has purchased that device and is proposing to operate it. So some kind of licensing or permitting system makes sense as an enforcement tool. There are, on all of these systems, aircraft systems, unmanned or otherwise, there is a requirement that they be marked and identified at this point, at least by the FAA. I think that's probably widely ignored for recreational users. But that is a sensible enforcement scheme, and I don't think it's so onerous that we wouldn't be able to make it part of a policing scheme. The other thing is, relative to recreational users, and I don't know enough about these, I don't have one of these systems myself, and I'm not familiar with the clubs that operate these kinds of systems. The other possibility here, I think, and I'm not sure it's a regulation of airspace that would conflict with the FAA's authority in this area, would be to ban surveillance and cameras, as the Berkeley ordinance does, on recreational users. Recreational users, as I understand it, operate those systems for whatever, racing, for air,
For commercial use.
for recreational use. The commercial users are regulated by the FAA. I don't believe we're going to be able to regulate in any fashion that's inconsistent with the FAA in that regard. But for recreational users, I'm not quite sure why a camera or surveillance would be necessary for those particular users to be able to operate and continue to enjoy that hobby.
Well, but I think that's part of the hobby.
Right.
Okay, maybe
I have a
somebody,
friend.
maybe somebody has somebody
I
who
have a
belongs
friend
to
in
these
northern
clubs. I don't know.
Minnesota who takes the most gorgeous photographs of the lake, sunrise, sunset, boats on the lake, but they are right there underneath it. One of them is handling the controls, which is flying it, and the other one is using the camera and clicking. So I'm curious if anyone can find out how sophisticated the recreational drones can be. I can't imagine. I'm wondering if somebody was within eyeshot of the drone that was hovering over your house or looking in that girl's room. I can't imagine they can be programmed to travel beyond one's sight, or they're awfully expensive recreational hobbies.
They can.
They can be, huh?
Yeah,
For
they're pretty
$1,000,
amazing.
Commercial users now can purchase drones that are
Well, I'd
less-
also worry that they're potential thieves who are casing out the neighborhood or individual homes. So, can we suggest that owners use them in their own property or at a public park or something like that?
Well, you can, and that's where things get become grayer. The line of sight control that you just mentioned is part of the regulations right now, that you can't, neither a commercial user or a recreational user can operate a device out of line of sight. So that's one means of control, that it can't stray too far from the user, whoever that is, or the operator. But the quantifying or categorizing the airspace over someone's residence is not an area of the law that's well defined. So can we regulate?
Quantifying meaning?
How far do you own
own,
up in
yeah.
the air? And then how do you determine whether or not a particular device is over somebody's property? Is it over somebody's property because it can surveil into the house, but it's not it's not parallel to the property lines, or that becomes very difficult to determine once you get up above a certain height, maybe above the roof of a house or above the tree line on a property. But we don't have much definition in that area regarding legal ownership rights in airspace. That remains to be an area of the law that has to be further clarified or developed.
The one I saw at my house basically was hovering over my driveway, then kind of went across the street into the vacant lot, and then flew over my neighbor's house and over the top of the trees that are back there, and then just completely out of sight. So there was nobody within eyesight operating it. And I know my neighbor right behind us, and I know the two next doors, and it was neither of them. All my neighbors are equally freaked out about it because we feel like it's definitely somebody in this area, kind of north of Plainfield, west of County Line Road. So if anybody knows anybody who has one, we'd love to find out who it is, so we can.
Have you seen it more than once?
I saw it at my house once. My good friend who lives on just off of Elm Street is the one who had her daughter being videotaped from it. I was at the new Whole Foods in Willowbrook, and there was my son says this is a different drone, but there was a drone over the parking lot. That may have been a news agency or something because of the new opening there. And then my neighbor on the other side thinks she heard one outside her window.
Well, if nothing else, can we put something in the Friday memo or something so parents of any child, maybe they've given them one of these drones, it's a pretty exciting thing, if it's used correctly, they can, we can warn them about privacy issues, and please make sure that your child or you use the drone in in your home, I don't know, but just something that would, since we can't control it right now anyway, it sounds like our hands are sort of tied.
You don't want to inhibit someone from playing with their toy
Right,
in their
right.
backyard. Your grandson, you've got a drone.
Right, it sounds like a lot of fun,
birthday,
yeah.
And, little kids can lose control of it too and
Right.
don't mean any harm.
No, so I don't know what to say, but my suggestion is just.
Okay, Scott?
Scott, why did Evanston remove the moratorium? Did you have any chance? They
Not
had
sure.
a moratorium, and I read that in May of this year, they removed their moratorium on drones.
Was it most of the moratorium or moratoria across the country have been against law enforcement surveillance, the overwhelming majority. Not many of them have been addressed to this privacy issue.
So it may have been that.
Could be that they
You're saying
removed
now-
it or that they relied on the state law. There is a state law in place that would,
you
that
need
already
more?
prohibits, yes, certain kinds of surveillance by law enforcement. I guess just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that there isn't a way to regulate. What I'm suggesting is a moratorium may be a heavy-handed way to go about this. And it may be too drastic a measure at this point relative to what we do know about our regulatory authority. But there are other means if you adopted a permitting process, that if you're going to fly a drone, you first have to register in some fashion with the village so at least they know it's yours. And if in fact it's being used for some improper purpose at this point.
And have you had other villages that have done that, required a registration and a numbering system so they could be identified?
No, but no, I haven't. But one of the standard suggestions you see in a lot of these regulatory schemes that are being discussed at the local level is some kind of a registration process. And that without that kind of a process, policing any kind of enforcement tool anyway becomes almost impossible.
Would they register
We-
with the village or with the police?
Excuse me 1 second, Janet. Trustee Grasso.
Sorry.
Trustee Bowles, you hold on for a second. I'd like to ask our chief of police to address this topic before we move any further. And we discussed some things this morning I'd like him to share, but
One thing I wanted to add right off the bat is we're not totally helpless with this topic. The type of behavior that there's been 2 incidents, the first one being reported by Trustee Murphy at her residence, but the second incident involving the juvenile that type of behavior, you're starting to get into the criminal end. And there's criminal statutes that would be applicable depending on the investigation. Now, my officers were called to the residence that night, involved the second incident involving the juvenile with the drone, and what they did is they did a house-to-house canvass of the area, just knocking on doors, just asking people, do you know anybody? Do you have a drone? Do you know anybody that has a drone? Because of the type of behavior that took place with the drone.
Okay.
These are very sophisticated. I've looked into it a while back. I've got colleagues that have them. They have sophisticated mechanisms where if they lose the radio signal, they're GPS capable. They fly back to the homeowner, or I'm sorry, the resident or the owner of the drone. So, you know, unmanned aircraft hobbyists have been around for years, and we usually see they're regulated to forest preserved areas where they're allowed to fly, and they do that mostly because of the radio signals. And I had a family member that was really involved in that, is because the radio signal, if it gets involved with the aircraft, could cause a crash. What's different about these drones is they're easier to fly, and they're very sophisticated, where if you get in trouble, you hit a switch, the thing flies itself and comes back to where you live. So, and their cameras on it are high definition. So they're very sophisticated. When you see pictures from them, they're beautiful. I've seen pictures of going over downtown Naperville, used in commercial purposes for real estate, and so on. So, you know, disorderly conduct is a criminal statute that comes to mind in this incident. Reckless conduct, the reckless conduct statute, it doesn't matter if what's being done is illegal. It depends, the behavior, it depends on is somebody endangered by that behavior, which then you're getting into a class 4 felony. A disorderly conduct charge is it's a class C misdemeanor, which, you know, it's a fine mostly. But if we are able to find somebody that has this, and if we're fortunate enough to have the investigation go in our favor, where we can see what they have videotaped or on their hard drive on the drone itself, then we could possibly charge them. So there is an avenue we could take criminally, this type of behavior.
And how many reports have you had of this so far?
Just 2.
Just 2. And based on your research, do you know what is is there any distance limit between the actual owner of the owner of the receiver or whatever, and where it goes?
I haven't done research, just to be clear. I believe it's line of sight. I believe you have to have sight of it to control it, unless you could look at an iPad and get that signal back. I don't know for sure. I know it's very sophisticated and they're very expensive. They can go from $100 to $3,000 or more for commercial drones.
And in the 2 cases that were mentioned, was any consideration given to maybe mailing people within half a square mile, or within 100 houses each way?
Well, that's why the officers got out there right away, because they were pretty concerned too because of the behavior that night, the use of the drone. So trying to get that word out. In that area, as you know, it borders Willowbrook on that to the west. So it could be anybody in that radius there.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be residents. It could be someone parked in a parking lot somewhere.
Right.
That,
but we're not totally helpless. I mean, trying to find it's another thing.
Right.
You know, but you know, there is some criminal statutes that would apply if our investigation.
Anyone have questions of the chief?
I have a question for you. What are your, okay, so say I'm at my house and the drone comes and I want to shoot it with a gun or throw a baseball bat at it or a slingshot or a baseball or something and destroy it. Can they come back and do,
Well, you definitely
something
cano
to me?
fire a gun.
Yeah.
I advise against that, or we'll probably be arresting
People have been asking.
What about a BB gun?
No. That projectile is going to come down somewhere.
Someone's trespassing on my house, but I can't.
I would say the best thing is to give us a call, and if the officers can get there pretty quick and kind of watch where it flies to, So if you could throw a baseball and hit it, then that'd be pretty good too. But, we can get there pretty quick and try to track it where it's going. I really believe it's going to be somebody in the area, so.
Okay. Any other questions of the chief? Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
So we don't know, there's no definition on the range of these machines.
I do not.
You can't be in South Dakota and
No, I
and
think
program
it's like
it here.
No.
I've heard like 1,000 feet, but don't quote me on that, which is pretty far still.
I believe the recreational ones, I would say you have to be within a line of sight, which could be pretty far though.
Okay.
Interesting.
I don't believe you can fly it remotely, and you're getting into some pretty serious commercial drones or military use or law enforcement.
Are those commercial drones available to the retail public?
Well, it depends what the commercial operator is using, but yes, there are similar models available for recreational use. The recreational users may be more sophisticated than some of the commercial users. The commercial users are pretty straightforward, like, as you mentioned, realtors, construction sites,
Agriculture.
agriculture, right?
Well, knowing all this, any of the board members would like to suggest or have any other questions of Scott at this point in time?
I have a question, Scott. Has the city of Chicago done anything? I was reading something where they're saying they were limiting it to a quarter mile from schools and churches and places of worship and things like that, and not near Midway and O'Hare. Have you seen a ordinance come through the city at all or anything?
Well, the FAA would prohibit any use near an airport, landing or takeoff area within a certain distance. I don't know about Chicago. I know Chicago uses, not necessarily for unmanned aircraft, but they use ongoing public surveillance cameras for a lot of other purposes, so I'm not sure what they've done in this.
You haven't seen an ordinance come through the city or anything?
Not aware yet.
What about Amazon?
They can't, they are very unhappy with the proposed regulations at this point because they require you operate the drone by line of sight. So they cannot send something from Kenosha, Wisconsin to Burr Ridge.
And they're testing them now. They received approval from the government to test again.
Pardon, I can't hear you.
Right, so when you ask,
I just read that Amazon received approval again to begin testing the drones.
right, so when you ask what comments the federal government is getting on these rules, Amazon and businesses like Amazon that want to be able to use this technology are petitioning the government to revisit the proposed regulation at this point, which would not allow that kind of activity. And the range of a drone like this, Amazon proposes to use drones that can cross state lines.
At this point, is there any, what would be the next step for, is it additional research needed? Is it trying to get the word out through the police department to alert people to have, as to where they're located, who owns them, registration? Is there, what do you recommend?
Well, as the chief mentioned, I think in an urgent situation, if there is a trespass-like incident where somebody is using an unmanned system outside somebody's window on their property, I think that's covered by potentially by current nuisance laws, by current trespass laws, by current disorderly conduct provisions in the criminal code. There's sexual deviancy laws that potentially apply to this, the peeping Tom type situation. Otherwise, we will know, as I mentioned, although it's difficult to wait and to hesitate to act if we have a current problem. We will know more, or should know more, from the state of Illinois, especially regarding privacy regulation in the very near future. And the federal government will, I believe, will be changing its proposed rules to some extent before they issue them, but those are forthcoming as well. They should be issued shortly.
I believe you had a trustee.
Trustee Rensis?
I had a couple questions, please.
Okay.
Is each and every drone sold with a camera?
Not to my knowledge.
No. So if a parent buys a drone for their child, most likely it doesn't have a camera on it.
Right.
Okay. So, but an adult might buy a drone. He may buy with a camera. He may put his own camera on there, or someone underage might take their GoPro and attach it to their drone and have a camera system then, so they could videotape or photograph. So, okay, how would I mean, how does the chief feel about registration of these drones? Do you think that's a step in the right direction? If I'm a perpetrator, I'm not going to have my registration numbers showing, am I?
Probably not.
Probably not. So, I mean, you know, we end up punishing the good people out there that use these things properly and correctly, and the bad guys are going to find a way around the system.
As always.
As always. So, okay. Thank you.
$79 Toys R Us, a drone with a camera. I went and looked today.
But if I was a responsible parent and I had a 10-year-old, I wouldn't be buying him one with a camera. So there's nothing good that can come of that.
I don't know, I think they could take some pretty neat pictures of their house and over their school.
Supervised, they could, yes.
Yeah, supervised,
Yes.
right, supervised. Well, I think this should be an ongoing discussion, and we have to do a little more thinking about it, because I don't know, listening to the pros and the cons of registration and forbidding them or limiting their use, it sounds like we're all sort of floundering. So can we discuss this more later after we've given it more thought, or?
I agree. I don't want to create a regulation and then it's tested in the courts.
Yeah.
And we lose.
Trustee Murphy?
I'm not interested in seeing a moratorium on drone use in Burr Ridge, but I think at the very least, we should require registration. Obviously, we're not going to get everybody, but I mean, could you imagine the world if we didn't, or how would we ever catch criminals if we didn't require people to put license plates on their cars or register their dogs? You have to do all of that. So when you have one of these things that can be used to hurt people or possibly videotape a little girl in her bedroom, I think it's pretty important to do something about it, and this seems like a really easy thing.
The $79 drone with the camera at Toys R Us?
Well, I don't know what the punishment is going to be for not doing it. I can't imagine.
But
you're
you're
it's gonna
recommending
be like a drinking thing. If you catch an underage drinker, are you going to send him to jail the first time he does it? Probably not. But
you're recommending registering the toy drones too.
Well, we can research and only do certain levels of
Right.
drones. Like
Yeah,
if you
size,
have one that
right.
has a
Just
range of
the
over
weight.
100 feet, then
Okay.
it has to be registered. If it only can go 25 feet and stay on your own land, that's fine.
So you're proposing something that might have some restrictions on distance or power of it, possibly? Okay. And then we certainly, but we have to look into, of course, what the punishment might be, what the enforcement policy might be, probably first.
Yeah, I mean, we should definitely look into that, but I would think at the very least we would begin with a fine. If you're running your drone on somebody else's property, there should be something that,
All right. Okay. Trustee Schiappa, anything else?
No, I agree. I think we should start making steps to regulating it. I don't see a difference between a drone looking in a little girl's window or a man. And I understand. I mean, I have little kids myself, and I'd like to see steps towards regulating this as well.
if I could just add to that, there is a bit of a difference between just one man looking in a little girl's window, is just that one guy is seeing her. If you have a drone and you're recording a little girl in her bedroom window, you can post it on the internet. It's quite a bit worse, I think.
More invasive.
Yeah. You can email it to your friends, you can post it on Facebook, you can humiliate them on social media. I mean, the possibilities are endless.
I think we need a lot more research, and I don't disagree with registering them, but at what level, at what, weight? as Scott mentioned, 55 pounds was one of the weight classifications. I think we need to tread carefully and look at, I certainly don't want someone to test the, what we're doing in the courts, and then we spend a lot of money on nothing, on losing. So let's tread carefully and look at all the criteria we want to put around the registration process. And is it for a fee to register them?
I'm sorry?
I hadn't thought of that.
Fee income.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you have to have fees
don't
to
need-
pay for the regulation.
Pay the legal fees for the regulation.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, you do. In order to administer and develop and pay these expensive attorneys to develop there have to be fees to offset it, I'm sure. But it sounds like it's a very important topic and one that requires some research, quite a bit of research, and certainly
Scary.
perhaps right now it's what we can do immediately is perhaps get a better notice from the police department as to the instances and to be able to have people reported immediately. Something we do right away. Trustee Grasso, any other comments on this topic?
Just that we need to have more research before we can do anything.
And Francis? Anything?
I urge the residents, if they spot these things being used inappropriately, to call the police immediately and let them do their jobs to help us out.
Okay, so carrying the ball forward, is there anyone that wants to do additional research on this? To find out what's possible, or to, anybody? Anybody on the board?
I think the staff should be doing some research on it.
Scott, when can we expect some, you think by the end of the year, end of this quarter, beginning of next quarter?
The federal regulations may be complete by then. The state won't be until next summer. I would imagine they'll take their full 1 year or 9 months to complete their work. Yeah.
Okay, let's stay informed, stay on top of it. If the chief will not let us know, of course, any increases of the instances, and you can keep us up to date on occasion as to what dates might be.
Make sure Steve is aware of any developments that we become aware of. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And under other considerations, any for announcements, deliberation, and/or discussion only, and no official action will be taken.
Well,
Trustee Francis?
Please.
I was just going to say, we're definitely going to try to publicize this, Paula, in newsletters and on the website and so forth, and make sure that residents know if they have concerns that they should call the police department immediately. So we'll definitely try to keep this on the radar as an issue of concern. And believe me, we're not the only community talking about this. It's being talked about all over the place, and we definitely need to stay on top of it. The other announcement I'd like to make, there was a final score. St. Louis 6, Chicago 8.
Yeah.
We won.
Cubs win. Cubs win.
We won.
Oh, that was tricky, Steve. That was tricky.
On that note.
Little drama.
Awesome.
Trustee Francis, anything else?
Yes, well, I was just thinking back to the motor fuel tax. Wasn't that tax enacted to collect monies statewide, distributed to the local government so they could continue to maintain and improve their roads systems?
The trucks are destroying.
Also the state roads too, so the state gets a portion and we
Yes,
get a portion.
the state roads and the municipal roads, and now they're holding our portion hostage.
Well, you have a new governor who maybe doesn't understand that, so.
Us and the lottery winners.
Being held for his direction?
Oh, yeah.
Withheld?
I mean, I think the excuse is that they don't have the authority, but I don't think there's any question. Because remember, they've already swept any surplus money in the MFT fund to balance last year's budget.
Yes.
So he had no hesitation to use those dollars to balance the budget. I don't think they're going to have any hesitation at the end of February when they're really under the gun to use those dollars. Now, that's just me speaking, I don't know for a fact, but it just seems that they're in such dire straits that it'd be pretty easy for them to do.
It's a tremendous quagmire there, and we're getting swept up into it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other resident comments? Any residents would like to address the board this time?
Tom White once again. In anticipation of your meeting, 2 meetings from now, you'll be discussing the police pension tax levy and also the state of the pension fund. Last year, when making the police pension presentation, we reviewed the following. In 1993, the state gave municipalities an option to provide either actuarially based funding or a 40-year ramp plan. The ramp plan allowed immediate tax relief, but eventually ever-increasing required contributions. Burr Ridge, as did most other municipalities, informally adopted the state's endorsed ramp plan. During the first 15 years, through 2008 of the ramp plan, we went from having more than enough assets to cover all of the officers' pension benefits that had been earned to that point to a $3 million deficit by 2008. Many other municipalities were in the same situation. Through the lobbying of many groups, municipalities included, Springfield delivered the following: significant benefit reduction for new hires after 2010, a new 30-year ramp funding plan similar to the one passed in '93, which again provided minimal payments in the early years, which were designed to grow the municipality's pension debt over the first 20 years, eventually ramping up to the required contribution so as to achieve 90% funding by 2040. With new legislation, effective 2016, the Police Pension Fund was given the power to collect annually the full minimum state-required pension contribution, which, as the ramp plan funding increases, will become problematic for many municipalities. Springfield also tried to immediately bring relief by delivering an across-the-board reduction in the benefits for active as well as already retired public employees. But as I reported earlier, the state Supreme Court found the reductions unconstitutional. The Illinois Department of Insurance in 2012 pension audit cited the village for failing to provide the minimum statutory police pension funding for the years 2008 through 2010, with the deficit totaling $314,000. The village contended that the shortage is, as I understand it, only about $230,000. Regardless, the village administrator often continues to state that the village has provided the required funding while totally ignoring the shortage. Our 2014 presentation pointed out for the first time in the fund's history, expenses exceeded income, resulting in the fund's liquidation of $35,000 in trust fund assets. Consider that the trust fund represents the assets which are needed to fund the pension liabilities that have already been earned. The trust fund assets are invested and are expected to grow. Annually, it is expected that since each officer has another year of service credit, that monies will be deposited in the trust fund to cover the additional liability. When expenses for the fund exceed income, the additional money needed to pay the excess expenses comes out of the trust fund. The rebuttal by the village administration pointed to the fact that the trust fund had a good year from an investment standpoint, and so the fund did not liquidate trust fund assets, but actually accumulated more. Furthermore, their claim was that the surpluses are projected for the foreseeable future, insinuating that our presentation was inaccurate. We agreed that the trust fund had a good year, but the trust fund will have good years and bad years. The trust fund assets are committed to benefits already earned. Since each year the officer accumulated an additional year of service credit, there should be more new money deposited in the trust fund to cover the additional liability, but there wasn't. I mentioned that when the pension fund withdraws money from the trust fund, we are in fact liquidating trust fund assets. For 2015, we actually had to liquidate a little over $70,000 from the trust fund to cover expenses. The results of the actuarial valuation for 2015 that you'll hear 2 meetings from now basically says that our liabilities increased $1.6 million. Our assets only increased $1 million. Therefore, we increased our unfunded liability by another almost $600,000. In summary, as long as the village continues to provide an actuarially unsound police pension contribution, things will only get worse. When it comes to the police pension fund, there are no surpluses, only growing deficits, which the audit has certified. However, the auditor did mention a year-end general fund surplus, which was once again transferred out to the capital projects fund.
Excuse me, Tom, I want you to know your 5 minutes is up. Is there something you can wrap up pretty quickly?
Okay, sure. The clock is ticking. What will be the board's legacy? Thank you.
I don't mean to comment on this, but when you keep saying that we had to take money out of the trust fund to cover expenses, that's not true. I mean, I'm looking at my finance director, and he's looking at me like, where does that come from?
Okay.
We don't need to do this tonight, Tom, but what I would ask you to do, because you keep bringing that up, I want you to talk to Jerry and show him where this money had to come from out of the trust fund to cover expenses, because it's just not correct.
I can do it very easily.
Okay, well, that's what I'd ask you to do, is talk
Okay.
to the finance director, because we don't believe it. And we're the ones who operate the fund, and we don't know what the heck you're talking about. That's number one. Number two, I don't agree with anything that you're saying, is you should obviously assume. And we'll have our discussion again in November when we talk about the pension fund, which, by the way, you will find that we have to add another $100,000 this year to the pension costs, just to cover the state's required number, okay? So that means that could potentially be 100,000 or at least 60 or more thousand that will be reduced, the revenues will be reduced by in the general fund. So again, that discussion will come up in a couple meetings, but as I say, I continue to vehemently disagree with Mr. White.
Thank you. Any other residents that would like to comment at this time? Reports and communications from village officials. I would just like to thank everyone again. It was a couple weeks, but we haven't had a meeting since the bridge dedication. I'd like to thank all the residents that were there, as well as our legislators and that wonderful Gower School Gower Middle School band that was there. Everybody that was there to support it. I'd also like to just make one quick comment. I had a very kind of a big surprise last week where we may not have a university in our village, but we do have a connection to one that I accidentally found out, that Lewis University down in Romeoville is actually founded by, and I guess somehow co-run by the De La Salle Christian Brothers, and the headquartered right here in Burr Ridge. It was just one more example of some phenomenal organizations that are right here in our town, of the 500 businesses that we have, that never ceases to amaze me. So, just want to end on that note. And now we do have non-residents comments. Dolores?
Good evening. My name is Dolores Caesar, former trustee. I'll briefly recap my comments from the last board meeting, and then I would like to finish what I wanted to say at the last board meeting. August 24th, Trustee Grasso and I had an argument in the foyer because I felt that she should have recused herself on 2 votes. This upset her very much, and she said she was going to look for ways to shut me down. So that took place at the September 4th. Don't be a denier. It's true. There was a witness. Mr. Straub was the witness.
There were lots of people
In
leaving the
any
meeting
event,
that evening, Dolores.
It's
A lot
my
of people
5
witnessed
minutes.
it.
It's not yours.
Thank you.
In any event, at the May 9th, 2011 meeting, former village president Gary Grasso decided at the first audience portion that there were 3 restrictions that had to be met in order to address the board during that time. And if you weren't a resident or a business owner or owned property in the village, you couldn't address the board at the first audience portion. At the May 23rd, 2011 board meeting, the same thing took place. Now, I think it would be helpful to review the timeline of the Open Meetings Act, which was amended in 2010, and it became effective on New Year's Day, 2011. The key words, well, the amendment reads, any person shall be permitted, any person, he doesn't say you have to be a resident, any person shall be permitted an opportunity to address public officials under rules established and recorded by the public body. This is Public Act 96-1473. The key words in this amendment are rules established and recorded by the public body. The problem here is that the village's municipal code had no language restricting its citizens' right to address public officials based on residency. When Gary Grasso took it upon himself to restrict my right of free speech at the May 9th, 2011 board meeting and subsequent board meetings based on the fact that I was no longer a village president. Perhaps this constitutes official misconduct, and the BGA might see it that way as well. The amendment to the Open Meetings Act became effective more than 4 months prior to Grasso's edict to arbitrarily decide who could address the board during the first audience portion based on residency, as a residency requirement was not stated in the village's municipal code. You only put it in the municipal code at the last board meeting. And we all know who it was directed to. At his first board meeting after being sworn in, Mr. Straub made the same mistake. May 13, 2013, when he stated, quote, that non-residents may address the board during the audience section at the end of the meeting, unquote. Page 162 of the board minutes of May 13, 2003. Where was this advice from Mr. Straub coming from? You think maybe from his predecessor, Gary Grasso? I would also like to remind the board that in the late 80s, when the County Line Road corridor was being considered by the village, which amounted to a taking of land from every County Line Road property owner, 2 of the 3, what are you smirking about? That's exactly what it was, a
Okay,
taking of
Dolores,
land.
you're wasting your time here.
I'm almost done. 2 of the 3 protagonists promoting the corridor were not village presidents. They were not village presidents. But they were not denigrated at board meetings by being referred to as non-residents. I suppose I should feel flattered that 4 members of this board are so afraid, are so intimidated.
And Dolores,
by
your time
an
is
85
officially up, so if you can wrap it up quickly, I appreciate it.
who regularly attends board meetings, comes prepared with documentation, lived on County Line Road almost 50 years, was elected trustee 4 times, and I certainly got more than 47% of the vote, and served 14 years on the board uncompensated. You should all be embarrassed, you 4 people who voted for that ordinance at the last meeting. Why are you people?
Dolores, your time is up. Your time was up a minute ago. I asked you to wrap it up quickly. I asked you to wrap it up. Your disparaging comments have gone on long enough. You're over your time.
Would you like
You have 10 seconds left.
I'm asking you a question. Would
You
you
have
like
10 seconds left. Thank you, Dolores. I would, however, like to have our attorney, as long as he's sitting here, to explain, to perhaps rebuff some of your comments about what the village can and cannot do about this ordinance, and what as far as the Open Meetings Act and what the village ordinance, what the village has the ability to do. Scott?
Well, if I understood your comments, they were directed to something that happened in 2011. The board has acted now to appropriately bring forward rules for consideration by the board, adoption by the board, and recording in the administrative code. So the process provided for these kinds of rules has been followed and is being followed at this meeting.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call?
Trustee Scapa.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Bolus.
Yes.
Trustee Grasso.
Yes.
Trustee Francis.
Yes. We thank you all for joining us this evening. Motion, the meeting is officially adjourned.